We've already talked about how to distribute or balance your plate using the plate method, and I will be sure to link that video above if you haven't seen it already. But another option that you have in order to distribute or balance your macronutrients, which we now know to be protein, carbohydrates, and fats, is to use this hand portion guide. And it's pretty simple because most people will have an equivalent kind of hand size compared to their body size, meaning that a person who is larger, who would require more calories, is probably going to have slightly larger hands, and a person who's smaller, who may need less calories, may have slightly smaller hands. So it's cool how it's kind of already proportionate to our body size so that we could portion out appropriately for your individual needs. So we are looking at each of these based on the macronutrient that we're talking about. So when it comes to protein, that would be your animal proteins like chicken or fish or beef or pork or eggs, non animal meat, but still animal byproducts such as like cottage cheese or Greek yogurt. That's going to be a palm size portion. So that means the inside between your fingers and your thumb, about that width, height, and thickness. So it's really easy to use that guide when it comes to like an animal protein like beef or chicken, because it's a solid item. But when it comes to things like dairy products such as cottage cheese or Greek yogurt, that gets a little bit trickier, but you're kind of looking at somewhere in the realm of like 3/4 of a cup to a cup of those types of items would be a very similar equivalent. But for the most part, we're looking at that palm size, width, height, and thickness. Now let's move on to carbohydrates. So this one is going to be a cupped hand. So it'd be basically like what you can kind of hold inside of that cupped hand. So that would be your grains, your rice, pasta, breads, those kinds of things. That's what we are considering when we're talking about carbs here, because technically fruits and vegetables also would count as carbs. Those are carbohydrates primarily. And so it's when we're looking at these different hand portions, there's a designation between, okay, what is the portion of vegetables versus what is a portion of carbs. So understand the difference. Yes, fruits and veggies still do count as carbs, but when we're talking about your portioning, we are talking about things that we would mostly consider carbs from a kind of a more traditional sense, meaning grains or breads or pastas and things like that. So cupped hand here. Now, if you are a highly active person, or for those who are who start out at a body weight that might be quite a bit higher, or if you or a lot of times this is for males versus females, you may not be looking at one serving of carbs. You may be looking at more than one in a meal. So just because it says a serving of carbs is one cupped hand, that does not mean that that's all you can fit into a meal, because one serving you may not just need one serving depending on your caloric and macronutrient needs. So for somebody who is quite highly active, who does a lot of, physical activity, a person who starts out at a larger body size, or a male versus a female might need more than one serving. So that would be your 2 cupped hands. So just know that just because it says one serving does not necessarily mean that your individual needs dictates that you only get one serving. You might not get 1.5 servings or 2 servings. This cupped hand just represents what one of those servings would be, but you may not just eat that. Same thing goes with protein. A person may be designated 2 palms of protein if their protein needs are higher. So keep that in mind. This is just showing what a serving is, but your number of servings will be dictated by your individual needs. Then we're going to move on to vegetables. So this is going to be a closed fist. closed fist would be a serving of vegetables. And so that's got a lot more thickness than your cupped hand serving of carbs. So we're going to probably have a bigger serving of vegetables than whatever we had designated for carbs. That's going to add volume to your meal, and it's going to be a very low calorie way to add fullness. It also is a huge portion of your like nutrient density. So you're getting tons of vitamins and minerals and plenty of fiber from those types of things. And last but not least, we have our 1 serving of fats. Now, I've already linked the other video that talks about the plate method. In there, I discuss how fats kind of play into this. A thumb-sized portion of fats would be for like a solid fats item. That would be things like avocado, cheese, nuts. That's the portion, because fats are quite calorie dense. So you do have to be careful because they add up very, very quickly, a lot quicker than people realize. However, when it comes to a thumb-sized portion of fat, that may actually get used up in other things. For example, if you are cooking your vegetables in butter or like olive oil or avocado oil, then your portion of fat is going to get used within that serving of vegetables, and your veggies would now count as veggies and a fat because you used a cooking oil. So you may not want to have an extra serving in there because you've already technically allocated that serving. The other area where you might find that fats are combined with something else is with your protein. So there are leaner sources of protein, and then there are fattier sources of protein. And there's nothing wrong with fattier sources of protein. For a lot of people, it's more of a flavor choice than anything else. The difference between chicken breast, which is quite a bit leaner, and chicken thighs is generally a serving of fats. So keep that in mind. If you are choosing fattier portions of protein, such as chicken thighs, steak, fattier cuts of fish, full fat Greek yogurt, full fat cottage cheese, whole eggs versus egg whites, there's going to be a portion of fat that's already included into your protein source. So you may not want to incorporate a second one. Okay. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're using that hand portion guide. But this can be a great way to understand kind of what your needs are in terms of each of those items and approximately how much should go on your plate if you're not sure. If you have previously created meals where maybe your carbs were like 2 or 3 cupped hands and your portion of protein was, half of your palm, then we may want to start looking at the sizes of those portions to distribute them a little bit better based on your macronutrient needs.